The regional security system is a network of police and military organizations from across 8 member states, namely Antigua and Barbuda, Barbados, St. Kitts and Nevis, Dominica, Grenada, St. Lucia, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and more recently Guyana. As the RSS prepares to celebrate its 40th anniversary on October 29, 2022, we thought it fitting to chat with its founding fathers about what led to the inception of this organization. My name is Sharifa Medford, and today we'll be chatting with Brigadier Rudyard Lewis and Justice Sherman Moore about the birth of the RSS. What was your role in the development of the regional security system?
Well, I just happened to be at the right place at the right time, as they say. The prime ministers of the Eastern Caribbean perceived that there were security issues which concerned their governments and thought that they should do something about it. After a lot of talking, discussions, and activities ending with an attempted coup in Dominica in 1981, they decided that they really had to get on with setting up some organization. So it ended up with me. I was asked to offer suggestions, and discussing it with Justice Moore here, we came up with a plan which we put to the prime ministers, and that involved flying up and down the region, holding discussions with prime ministers and commissioners of police, and with Barbados and Antigua, where there were also armies, before we came up with the plan for the regional security system.
What was your position at the time that would have put you in a position to be the person to have these discussions?
I was the chief of staff of the Barbados Defense Force.
Is there any particular reason why they would have asked Barbados to lead these discussions?
I really don't think I can speak for the prime ministers. Okay. They had their own perceptions and ways of doing things. So one left it to them and did as you were told, like a good soldier.
And Justice Moore, he came to you, as you said, and your role then?
Well, my role was to get a legal framework, having decided what we wanted. I then had to get a legal framework in place. And the easiest way at the time, since it had not yet reached the stage where we thought of having a treaty, the idea of having a memorandum of understanding prepared to give effect to the regional security system was left to me. So I did my research, and we prepared a draft, which we, Brigadier and myself, discussed, and eventually we were tasked with going around the Caribbean, as the Brigadier said, to discuss the draft with the prime ministers and their security officials, and we arrived at a document that was workable. The main point was to set up a headquarters, and Barbados was headquarters at that time, was called the Central Liaison Office. And we had to bring people, policemen, mainly policemen, and because we were dealing with police forces except for Antigua. So they were brought to Barbados for that purpose. At the time, I was the Chief Parliamentary Counsel of Barbados.
Can you explain some more what would have gone into actually drafting the treaty?
Well, we haven't reached the treaty yet. The Memorandum of Understanding was the first step, because what you see now has been refined over many years. But it was a question of research, discussions, looking at how other countries who have security arrangements have dealt with them, and coming up with something that suited our needs and our purpose. If you look at the areas of cooperation, we have search and rescue, protection of installations, marine installations, and things of that kind. There is also an area of military cooperation in the event that one of us is attacked by some external force. We also looked at peacekeeping operations and drug interdiction and that sort of thing. So it was a fairly broad base. The areas are quite broad based and very much part of what we need for our own purposes in this region, because we're just a group of small islands just trying to ensure our own safety and security.
Can you tell us about any of the challenges you would have faced during the initial stages?
The RSS consists of 2 military forces and now 7 police forces. When we started, it was 5 police forces. So the first challenge really would be a matter of getting the policemen to think like soldiers and for the soldiers to work with policemen. And so we had to do a lot of training. And that was the first thing on the agenda for the RSS. Luckily, we were assisted by countries like United Kingdom and Canada in that early training.
What about the challenges that you would have faced with the funding model for the RSS? How would you receive those funds to assist with the programs and policies?
Well, that was a decision of the prime ministers. They worked out the funding. And when we started, in fact, Barbados paid 40% of the budget, and the other country, each of the other countries paid 10% of the budget.
Now on to some more lighter moments. What were some of the more memorable experiences during the initial stages and even throughout your tenure as head of the RSS?
I don't know. I can't really think of anything that you would say was more memorable than running the organization.
Okay, as the founding fathers of the RSS, was it your intention for RSS to be a full regional organization, or as it has been for the last 40 years, a sub-regional alliance with primarily the small island states of the Eastern Caribbean?
I believe that the idea initially, as I understand it, was to have just a sub-regional organization to deal with security matters and search and rescue and general things that affect these islands. Up to today, I don't think it's a supranational body. It's still part of a small organization at the security level. And it became a treaty organization many years after it was, many years after its inception, because it was easier internationally to deal with a corporate body, a body that had its own juridical personality, than with a group of islands, because even though we had the Memorandum of Understanding, it didn't create unity, one body. It was just among ourselves. But once we needed to go out and get other things done for the RSS, we needed a body that could speak with one voice. And that is where we had then to implement the treaty and create a corporate body.
Now we have the smaller states like Anguilla and Montserrat, and the larger states such as Jamaica and Trinidad. Was there any discussion about including those countries in the RSS?
Well, again, that was a matter for the prime ministers. Okay. The RSS consists of Barbados, Antigua, those are the two with armies. Then Grenada joined after it came back into the fold back in 1983.
After 83.
In fact, they joined at the beginning of 85 after the government as we know it was set back up in Grenada. St. Vincent was one of the first ones. St. Lucia, Dominica. In fact, Dominica and Barbados were the very first, and Miss Charles in Dominica was the prime mover. Mr. Compton in St. Lucia, Mr. Cato
St. Vincent.
In St. Vincent. Eventually, Mr. Mitchell took over in St. Vincent. The Birds in Antigua, their Bird and his son Lester, who were the prime minister and the foreign minister respectively. Lester Bird became prime minister eventually. And it was up to them to decide who came in. There was talk at one stage about Trinidad. That didn't happen. We did brief the Jamaicans at one stage, and we did also talk to Guyana at one stage. But that was up to the prime ministers.
Okay, but you would have made suggestions, I would assume, based on the similar disposition that they would have been in.
Well, we listened to the prime ministers.
Yeah. You asked about Montserrat and Anguilla and those places. They were British colonies, overseas colonies, they call them now overseas territories. The British government is responsible for their external relations, and they would have had to get permission from the UK. We don't know what happened behind the scenes, but we could not have invited anyone because we didn't have, the authority rested with the prime ministers and their overseas counterpart.
As we know, the RSS was formerly called the CLO, and it was conceptualized as a coordinating secretariat. Do you see that this role is still relevant today, or do you think that we should change to a more operational headquarters with a standing force here?
Well, that depends on how those who now manage affairs see it. They know what threats they're dealing with. We certainly cannot now, from what you might call our proverbial armchairs, indicate what we think should be, because we don't have the facts.
So do you have any thoughts about the establishment of a regional Coast Guard?
I am not aware of the present situation, but over the years we did discuss a regional Coast Guard. And we did operate, the RSS did operate as a region of the RSS countries, the ones that belong to the RSS, did operate as a regional Coast Guard. So we didn't have an organization, but operationally, we were a regional Coast Guard. Certainly, until I left the organization, that is how it was.
So was something lacking from exercise trade winds that you would have chosen to?
Well, we had several exercises. There were lots of exercises, and all part of training. And some exercises developed and became bigger as we were joined by some of the metropolitan countries, and more funds became available. But certainly at the beginning, we wanted to prove, and we proved that the RSS countries could operate if they had to on their own.
On the subject of training, I know, obviously, with training, we have officers from the other member states more than likely coming to Barbados to participate in the training courses. Can you describe what it was like then, where I guess there were limited resources, and how did you facilitate the training courses across the member states?
Every one of the countries had different levels of training, but we moved the training around to the different countries.
So it wasn't a matter then of officers coming to Barbados?
Yes, officers came to Barbados to do training. In fact, this building here was built for training. In fact, one particular course, which it suited us to do because we had the facilities of the Barbados Defense Force available. And this building was built right next to the Barbados Defense Force building. So we were able to work together and use Barbados Defense Force facilities. But other than that, there was lots of other training being carried on in other countries. We were determined, and the prime ministers were determined, that the RSS could stand on its own.
Can you describe how it was set up?
As far as I know, you still have the air wing, you still have training. The emphasis may be different. I don't know. But the air wing, the Coast Guard, training, the ability to react to hurricanes and disasters in other countries, all of that was there from the beginning of the RSS. If you look at the memorandum of understanding, and later, after we did the initial memorandum, which was Justice Moore's baby, we did an amended memorandum, and then we did the treaty, which put a different view of life, as it were, on the RSS.
And you say we. Did you have a team of persons working with you to get the job done?
Basically, the two of us.
We worked as a team.
Tell us about the selection process for persons who were working at RSS at the time of its inception.
You know, you have the commissioners of police and the army commander in Antigua. So it wasn't just us, because you had to work with those people. And, you had to be talking to them. In fact, I used to talk to commissioner of police almost every day, and visit them at least once a quarter. So it was very much a matter of a team. And of course, we had representatives from each island here, as I think you still have in the office. So it was very much a team.
So it was basically a well-oiled machine.
Yeah.
And in the early days of preparing for the MOU, it was Aero Services, that the Cessna, that we would go to the islands, island hopping, for discussions with prime ministers and commissioners of police. It's because it was necessary to get about quickly, go and have meetings at 7, 8 o'clock in the mornings and be back home by 10 or so. So you needed your own aircraft, and that was available. So you'd go and see a prime minister or two, have a meeting, and come back home and sit down and do the paperwork thereafter.
Thank you so much, Brigadier Lewis and Justice Moore, for being here with us today, sharing the wealth of knowledge about the regional security system, why it was developed, and the process that you had to go through for its inception. That was our conversation with Brigadier Rudyard Lewis and Justice Sherman Moore about their role in the inception of the regional security system some 40 years ago. I am Sharifa Medford. Thank you for watching.